Welcome, everyone, to this briefing brought to you by the Israel Defense and Security Forum, IDSF. In Hebrew, our name is Bitronistim. It's a great pleasure to be joined today by Special Envoy for the Foreign Ministry, Fleur Hassan-Nahoum. Fleur, thank you so much for joining the briefing.
Thank you so much.
And I really appreciate you making the time for us right now. We had a little bit of an excitement just now before we went live with some type of fire drill, whatever that was. So
There's
really,
always
thanks so
something.
much.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks so much. So let's jump right in. You have a tremendous expertise in the Abraham Accords, diplomatic relations with Arab countries in the Middle East. I'm curious what your thoughts are right now, especially in light of what tragically just happened in the UAE. What are your thoughts on peace in the Middle East, peace with the Saudis, our relationship with the UAE? Just jump in on all of that.
Sure. Well, thank you very much for the question. I think it's an important question. And a lot of people, because of the murder that happened this week, this terrible, horrible murder that happened this week in the UAE, are wondering to themselves, what does this mean for the Abraham Accords? And what does that mean that President Trump is coming back into power? And he was the person who initiated the Abraham Accords. And so, look, I've been an optimist about this the whole time for a number of reasons. You know, at the beginning of the war, the 7th of October happened. People just thought this was the end of everything. It was the end of peace with our neighbors. It was the end of the Abraham Accords or the potential peace with Saudi Arabia. And what happened was actually very curious. First of all, we have to manage expectations. You're never going to get countries that we've made peace with, which are Arab or Muslim countries, coming out with Israeli flags and protesting for Israel. That's never going to happen. And in fact, rhetoric has to be very, very careful in these places because, again, there's a Muslim population and the Palestinian cause plays very, very well on the Muslim street, as we know. And so people were very pessimistic because we were really in a momentum from 2020 with the Abraham Accords, and we were doing so many collaborations, business and cultural and sports and anything you can imagine. So many Israeli tourists, million tourists from Israel going, so many flights a day. What happened to all of that? Well, what happened was that in November, the Arab League met, and they met to pass 3 boycotts on Israel and the Abraham Accords and one on America. And the Abraham Accords countries actually blocked the boycotts from taking effect. So in that sense, the Abraham Accords have really proven themselves to be incredibly positive. In April, when we were attacked by Iran, who was helping us on the ground? The UAE, Jordan, believe it or not, and Saudi Arabia. But what's really interesting is not that they helped us. It's that 2 days later, they admitted that they helped us. Because as I always say, in the Middle East, there's always rhetoric and reality. And sometimes they can be very different. And the fact that at this moment, after Iran attacked, and even after Iran attacked the second time, the fact that rhetoric and reality were one and the same is huge in the Middle East. And now that Trump is coming back, I really am very optimistic about prospects of peace with Saudi Arabia, mainly because Saudi Arabia has wanted that peace, because they want a defense pact with the United States, because they know, especially with Trump, that a defense pact with the United States means a triangulation with peace with Israel. And also they have this kind of 2030 vision for their country, which has got more than half young people, where they know that Israeli innovation is going to be extremely useful to them. And so for all those reasons, I'm optimistic that this is going to be happening.
So let me ask you again, this tragic murder in the UAE of the Chabad rabbi. Do you think that will derail the relationship with the UAE, or do you think it'll strengthen it?
Well, let me tell you, less than 24 hours after this poor man was murdered, there were 3 suspects already arrested. UAE prides itself on being a tolerant country. Jews felt pretty safe there, and this is a tarnish on their record as well as an infringement of their sovereignty. So I actually think that the fact that within 24 hours they had these guys arrested, and I don't even want to tell you what they're going through in custody right now. And if Iran was behind it, well, it only strengthens their resolve that the Abraham Accords can be a buffer, can be a way to stop the very, very nasty ambitions of the Islamic Republic of Iran.
That's obviously good to hear. So in terms of the Abraham Accords, um, do you see that as there's a new administration in the U.S. that we're going to start to see an expansion to new countries? Can you maybe share a little bit about what could be on the horizons?
Well, look, I think for the Israeli government and also the Saudi government, a Trump administration was going to be, well, Israel was going to get a better deal with the Trump administration than it would have gotten with the Biden administration that was basically pushing down everybody's throats the two-state solution, even though the Saudis didn't really need a two-state solution. They just wanted some type of process to peace. And so I think with Trump, that's going to be less relevant and therefore is going to be an easier piece to make. And so, yes, I'm very optimistic about those prospects. And I think that the time will be now. And once Saudi actually signs up, what you will see is that is a domino effect. A lot of countries waiting for Saudi to do this, to do the same. Indonesia is waiting for Saudi. Oman is waiting for Saudi. And I think once Saudi signs up, it may very well be game over for the Islamic Republic and their alliance, for example, with Qatar and with Turkey. That's going to give a real blow to this alliance of evil.
Okay, so I'm curious to know, this ceasefire in Lebanon that everyone is kind of anxiously waiting to see what the nature of the agreement is. How does that play into the broader interests of countries like the UAE and the Saudis? Do they care whether Hezbollah is attacking Israel? Do they see it as a weakening of Iran or potentially strengthening Iran because it's allowing Iran potentially to regroup in the quiet?
Well, I think that most intelligent people understand that Hezbollah is essentially the long arm of the Islamic Republic of Iran that has occupied Lebanon, has occupied Syria. People talk about the occupation, that's the occupation going on here in this region. And so I think that a blow to Hezbollah has always been good to the Sunni moderates because Hezbollah represents the arm of the Shia extremists. Um, However, my gut feeling is that the reason that we're doing this peace deal now is because something bigger is coming. And the only thing bigger that can be coming is that we're finally going to be dealing with the head of the snake, which is the Islamic Republic of Iran. Once we deal with the Islamic Republic of Iran, everybody else will fall like house of cards.
Okay, so there are a lot of questions coming in. I want to thank all of our viewers and supporters who send in the questions in the chat to my phone. They know how to get the questions, and it's great. Fleur, let me ask you a question. A lot of our
Sure.
viewers, primarily based in the US, are really asking to the root of Islam, which is way beyond my level of expertise, and the extent to which these countries project messages of anti-Semitism and potentially live a lifestyle or have values against Judaism. And then how does that work with the Abraham Accords?
Okay, so I have a lot to say about that, even though I'm not Muslim. Some people think I am because of my name. I'm actually a Sephardi Jew. So we've lived with the Muslims and Arabs, and we understand the subject quite well. So I will say a few things. First of all, I will say that nobody has ever spoken about or dealt with, not from the ADL and not from any anti Semitic organizations, about anti Semitism coming from Islamism. Nobody speaks about it. It's a taboo. It's almost like it's allowed because somehow we're in a conflict, so it's allowed. And I've been calling out Islamic anti-Semitism for many, many years, especially in the UNRWA curriculum that the whole world supports, especially in the media, even in countries where we've had peace with for decades, like Jordan and Egypt. They've always made it a pinnacle of their policy to continue hating Jews and hating Israel. And so that's something that the game has to be up, this anti-Semitism coming from Muslims, and they should not be getting a pass because we are somehow in a conflict with the Palestinians. And that has been a big mistake of the multiple organizations fighting anti-Semitism, that they've never wanted to talk about or deal with anti-Semitism coming from the Muslim world. It's almost like this whole cancel culture, PC thing. No, God forbid, brown people can't be anti-Semitic. It's complete rubbish, and we have to deal with it. And I said that in a conference where Deborah Lipstadt, Noah Tishby, and Jonathan Greenblatt were sitting on the stage with me. And I said to them, well, the only thing you guys won't talk about is Islamic anti-Semitism, which, of course, this predates October 7th. So that's the first thing. But the second thing is, people always say, oh, but there's so much anti-Semitism in Islam. Look, my family were kicked out of Spain 500 years ago by Christians who were hateful of Jews. So they either killed us or forcibly converted us. And what happened to Christianity? Christianity went through an evolution. Christianity abandoned that hateful dogma, and decided and now are our best friends and allies. So I don't think this is all lost. I think that Islam, not Islamism, but Islam has to also evolve and abandon its crazy, violent rhetoric, because much like many other religions have abandoned it, including Christianity. You have to understand that the Inquisition saw Jews burnt at the stake, women raped, children beheaded. Sound familiar? This was happening during the Inquisition and the Crusades. Now, if they managed to evolve, yes, it took a few hundred years, then I do think that there is some hope for Islam, even if it takes another 100 years. It will happen eventually.
Wow. Now, do you think that in order for Israel and Jews to live happily in the Middle East, there needs to be a reformation of this Islamic anti-Semitism? Or do you think the strength of the Abraham Accords and these strategic alliances are enough to really do the trick?
No, look, if we look at the UAE took out anti-Semitism from its school curriculum 10 years ago, 12 years ago. 2 years ago, they included Holocaust education in their curriculum. That's huge. Saudi Arabia took out anti-Semitism from their school curriculum 2 years ago. Now, this is going to take a while to go through the system, but it's very, very easy to deal with. All they have to do, and the world has to press them, and Egypt, for example, that gets so many billions of dollars from the United States. If the United States made the elimination of institutional anti-Semitism part of the condition of all the aid that they're getting, they maybe would sing a different tune.
That's so fascinating. Do you know what led to the UAE and the Saudis removing it from the curriculum? Was it like this awakening about the horrors of anti-Semitism?
It was the embrace of tolerance as an identity. That's what the Emiratis did. They embraced tolerance as their flagship, as their identity. And they had a year of tolerance just a couple of years before the Abraham Accords were signed. They were already moving that direction. And if you look at the statement of when they captured the murderers of this rabbi, it says, we are a flagship. We are a tolerant society and we protect all religions. That's very much has become their identity, thanks to their very wonderful king. And if everybody adopted this, then we would see a different Muslim world.
Wonderful. Okay, the ICC
Oh,
decision.
here we
How
go.
does that impact everything you're speaking about? The Middle East countries, places like Saudi Arabia and the UAE, when they look at Israel, does it kind of push them back a few steps?
Well, I think they're probably annoyed that that encourages the terrorists. It basically is incentivizing Islamists to attack Western countries. And they see themselves also in the line of fire. Remember, the UAE and Saudi have had proxy wars in Sudan and in Yemen against these Sunni extremists. Both UAE and Saudi kicked out their Sunni extremists. And of course, they hate the Shia extremists even more than they hate the Sunni extremists. And so, look, this ICC decision is bogus, is ridiculous. It's it's a new Dreyfus trial. And I think that the Trump coming back into power on the 20th of January and threatening to sanction every single judge down to the last intern, that may make them think twice and say, oh, all of a sudden, Israel's got its own law and order and internal scrutiny. Maybe that should be good enough for us. Miracles can happen. Let's see what happens.
It's interesting you liken the ICC decision to the Dreyfus trial. And of course, we know in the annals of Jewish history, the Dreyfus trial was one of those pieces that motivated Herzl to
Exactly.
fight for the. So I'm curious to
Exactly.
know, in all of your travels fighting for Israel, representing Israel. What are you seeing in terms of world Jewry standing up for Israel?
Well, listen, it's not just jewelry. I've just had a wonderful lunch with a very close friend of mine who's a reverend, a Christian lady who is set up something called Christians Against Anti-Semitism. And so we're seeing our allies and we're seeing the Jewish communities standing up and saying enough is enough. A lot of people bought the lie that somehow anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism are two different things. And now I think after October 7th, the masks are off and everybody understands that anti-Zionism was only an excuse to hate Jews.
Laura, you have a very popular, I guess it's a podcast, not the squad, but the quad.
The quad, out with the squad and
Yeah.
in with the quad. That's our
Definitely,
byline.
and I hope all of our viewers will check it out. So you've been following this war really very, very carefully, and I'm curious to know your thoughts on the direction we're headed for the day after. Now we're talking about these deals with the ceasefire in Lebanon and what's going to happen with Gaza. Are you optimistic that Israeli society is headed in the right direction?
I think our biggest problem in Israeli society is our own internal divisions, not our external enemies. That worries me more. The rhetoric, the rhetoric we have against each other in Israel, where people label other people, where people call other people traitors, this side or that side. That worries me a lot more than our external enemies. We need to get our hostages home. We need to bring our boys and girls back safely from the front lines. We need to reestablish deterrent in our northern border and our southern border. But I think that ultimately we've proven, and I think this is where our enemies always underestimate us. Our enemies always think that we've become soft belly liberals and we don't have the stomach for war and we don't have the stomach for anything. And look, we've been more than a year. Nobody thought that Israelis would go into a long war. We do what we have to do to survive. This is a war of survival. And that's what we've done. Am I optimistic? The Jewish people are 4,000 years old. We're the only people in the history of the world to solve our own refugee crisis and come back to our ancestral homeland after a genocide. Nobody has ever done what we've done. And on top of that, become an incredible technological superpower that is fixing the problems of the world. So am I optimistic? Am Israel Chai. That's what I say.
Amazing. You're giving us strength just hearing you say those words. So it's really special to hear. Again, I want to thank all of the viewers who are sending in all of these questions and a lot of words of support right now. Okay, so let's focus more on anti-Semitism for a second.
Sure.
The growth of anti-Semitism in the world, do you see that as, a main part of this war right now? Meaning, does Israel need to be actively fighting world anti-Semitism? Is that part of its mandate as the Jewish state? And if yes, how does it do that?
Well, it's funny you ask me because I'm part of the Misgav Institute for National Security and Zionist Strategies. And I've just written a paper with Lahav Harkov, a wonderful journalist, about this. And I think Israel does have a responsibility. The first thing we need to do is get our own communication strategy in order. News. There is no communication strategy in the state of Israel. The prime minister doesn't even have an international spokesperson. He doesn't have a diaspora affairs advisor. There is no head of the national public diplomacy directorate. It's a mess. Why? Because Israelis, born Israelis, don't really understand anti-Semitism. That's the truth. They've always been a majority. I see my children, they don't get it because they were born in Israel. I get it because I don't come from Israel originally. So the first thing is we need to actually get our act together and do what most normal countries do. Actually have a department or a ministry that is solely dedicated to communication strategy and public diplomacy. We don't have that. So how is the diaspora supposed to feel when they get zero support, even in messaging from the Israeli government? The only reason I'm still in politics, Moshe, is because that's what I want to be doing. Because I believe that people who made Aliyah have an understanding that maybe not Israeli borns don't. And so that's why I'm still hanging on there, because otherwise I would be a masochist. So that's the first thing. The second thing is do more to help our diaspora brothers and sisters be more connected to Israel, whether it's summer camps, whether it's whether it's different activities between schools. And I'm going to shamelessly plug my new organization now called Campus Israel. I've co-founded an organization to create a better international campus life in Israel in all of the main universities, more degrees in English, and get our diaspora kids to come and study full degrees in English. It'll be a different college experience. It'll be a more meaningful college experience. It'll be a normal college experience, and they don't have to face anti-Semitism. And just for bonus, it's a hell of a lot cheaper.
Wow. Okay. So first of all, it's not shameless, and I hope you'll share that link with us or details so I can post it to the chat. There are many people who tune into these briefings who are always looking for those types of programs that support the Jewish people and build up the state of Israel. So
Thank you,
that's
Moshe.
amazing. So I do hope you continue this fight to build out a proper media strategy for the state of
Yes,
Israel. So let me ask you a hard question.
yes.
What would be your number one recommendation? You know, we have many people who watch this briefing who are very active on social media, very connected to their local politicians. They're always writing op-eds. What would be your number one media strategy for all of our supporters worldwide who are in this fight for Israel?
I think the main thing that everybody should do is know who they are and where we come from. Once you know who you are, then you know what our future has in store for us. I think it's just very sad that not enough Jewish kids around the world know anything about our heritage, know anything about our connection to our land, know the fact that we are the indigenous people of Israel. We were created in Israel. King David built Jerusalem as our capital 3,000 years ago to unite the Jewish tribes. If people just knew our connection and our history, then the future is bright and is guaranteed.
Well said. Amazing. Okay, we have many people asking for that link for the details of your program, so you
So
must
I'm
share
just
it.
the program is being created right now. I have a landing page, but I don't have my portal yet. But I'm happy to share the one pager, and I'm actively building it up and looking for donors, people who want to be involved with the next big thing in the Jewish world and Jewish diaspora affairs. Campus Israel is it. I have a partnership with all the major Israeli universities, and we are going to build it up because I'm tired of playing defense. Defense is crying about how our children are being treated in college campuses. Offense is creating an alternative in Israel and saying, you're not going to protect our kids, they're going to come to us. That's offense.
Fleur Hassan-Nahoum, thank you so much for joining me. We'll make a deal on air right now that when you have more details, you have a proper
Yes,
website, you're going to come back and
absolutely. Thank you.
really share it with our audience because it sounds super important. Thank you to all of our viewers and supporters for tuning into this briefing. We will be back with you tomorrow, 10 a.m. Eastern Time, 5 p.m. here in Israel. Until then, stay safe, stay strong. Take care, everyone.